Hi everyone, welcome to Lectora Live, your inside track into Lectora. And I'm Rick Zanotti, welcome to the show, and I am joined by this handsome lad to my left. How are you today? John Mortenson. He is the Chancellor of Fresh Market University. He's also the, what was your official title? eLearning curriculum
eLearning curriculum developer.
Developer. And he is
or
a
designer.
long time, not designer, developer. That's different. It is different. He's a long-time Lectora user. Tell us a little bit about how you got into Lectora.
Well, I was first brought on to the Fresh Market a little over 2 years ago, and I was brought on to be their online curriculum developer and designer. They didn't really have much of an online courses at that time, and I was going to build the whole thing, which was what attracted me to it. But when I was brought on board, I was told that there were two particular tools that I'd be working with. One of them was CourseMill, which is Trivantis's LMS, and of course Lectora, which was their flagship product for making courses. So that's how I found out I was going to be using Lectora.
That's pretty good. And you just ran with it.
I did. I'd never used it before, actually. I'm not a long-time user, I guess. I've only been using it for a little over 2 years. But in that time, I've learned a lot.
Yeah, it's a great tool too. Now, how did you feel when you first got into it as far as learning curve or anything else? How did you delve into it?
Well, I was very fortunate. Working in a training department, my boss was very keen on me getting trained right away. So I attended the Trivantis training in New York with Tara, and I did a 3-day training, and it was fantastic. Now, I will say I came to Lectora not having experience directly in Lectora, but I did have experience on a lot of other tools. I mean, I've formerly have been a trainer for a lot of things like Dreamweaver and Flash. And so I was familiar with things, some familiarity with coding and ActionScript and stuff like that. But I'd never used Lectora before. But using it was, once I got to a certain point in the training, it really started to click for me. So, and I was able to go back and start developing pretty much right away. And I had some time to develop and play around with the features that were in Lectora. So I had a really fun project that I got to work on as I was learning things. So I would learn something, and then I would say, let me try that in my class. And it was a great way to learn.
That is good. That is a good way to learn. And having a Flash background doesn't hurt, though you don't really need to know Flash for Lectora, but just that whole development background's a good thing to know.
Absolutely. It kind of informs what is possible. And, you're not afraid of variables so much when you've had to. Flash makes you do a lot more of the work yourself. Lectora gives you gets a lot more of the legwork for you done. So I would say really that before I worked with Lectora, I worked at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and I was part of an online course development team. So my role there was just to do more of the front-end interface, and I worked with coders, I worked with video guys, I worked with a copywriter person. So I had a lot of other people. I designed some of the interactions, but I kind of felt like I worked on my little sailboat and then sent it down on the conveyor belt, and other people worked in it.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get to see the final product or have much interaction with students. Working in Lectora has been awesome because what it allows me to do is to be involved at all those stages. I get to do it all. I'm a one-man band, which in some ways can be tough if you don't know the tune. But in other ways, it's very satisfying because you get to see a project through from soup to nuts. And you can improve it all along the way. And if you run into an obstacle when you're in the, coding variables, or if you find your text is too long, you have the liberty and the authority to change it because it's you. So I really love that about working with Lectora.
And the variables in Lectora are very easy. They're very easy to get to, very easy to modify, to add to, delete from. They've done an incredible job of making something like that, I'd say, seamless, just straightforward.
Yeah, I don't think of myself as a coder. I've had to do some in the past, but It really feels more like an exercise in logic when you're
Yes.
doing
Yes.
variables, which hopefully that doesn't sound intimidating because it's not. A
It's
variable
not.
is kind of
Yeah.
like an on-off switch. It's either on or it's off. And there's basically those two modes. And then once you figure out how to apply that to your what you're trying to build, it becomes very easy. It's very if you can think it through, you can execute it.
You know, we've had John Blackman on the show a couple of times. I know John Blackman personally. He's a brilliant man. And what I really love about what he designed originally is that he encapsulated some very complex things into very easy metaphors that are easy to figure out. You don't have to be a programmer, which is nice. It doesn't hurt, but you don't need to be a programmer. Like you said, it's simple logic, and they guide you through it, which is what I really enjoy. I was a programmer for many years, and I just love good programming. And I think that's what they did with Lectora, just good programming. And not a heck of a lot of bugs, which is good. There's some like everybody else, but not many big ones.
Yeah, I agree.
So in your work with Lectora and just in your work in multimedia on the whole, what do you see as some of the strongest points of Lectora that you enjoy using, as well as what do you find some of the more challenging things?
Well, I think one of the strong things about Lectora is that the workflow really makes sense in terms of inheritance and
Hmm.
chapters and so on. My background is partly in, I have a strong Adobe background, like using things like InDesign or Quark Express or things like that. So the idea of having one place, so if you have things like page numbers that appear again and again, you don't want to have to put them on every page. You put them on the master page. And the same idea kind of passes through for Lectora. You put things in one place and they can flow through to all the pages you want. And then if there's a page that, oh, I don't want that on that page, you can disinherit it. So I think one of the first things that I really clicked with was the whole process of inheritance. And like you said, that's a great metaphor for understanding how that should work, how to pass things, and how to keep them from passing on. So if you want to have pages, some pages look different, and certain elements remain the same on every page.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, a
think the
lot of,
tricky thing is to build elements that can be inherited throughout your title, because if you can do that, you only have one place where you need to change them, but to build them in such a way that they respond to each individual page. And sometimes you can do that, and sometimes you can't.
well,
But
I discovered a trick the other day, and I discovered this. Don't tell anybody if they know it already. Don't break my bubble. I think I
I
discovered
won't tell
this.
anyone.
But there's something you can do with avatars. For example, if you use avatars a lot, most people just drag and drop onto every page, which is a little time consuming. You can actually put it in the title area, put the avatar in once right at the beginning, and then all you need is a quick action at the beginning of every page to change their position or another action to move them, and you're done. You never have to open up that avatar again, ever. It's fun.
That's a great feature.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wrestle with is I like to add the ability to have slide notes on my slides,
Hmm.
and I build that just in Lectora. So it's a simple toggle button: turn the notes on, turn the notes off.
Yeah.
The notes are different on every page, so the element can sometimes be unique on every page. You could make a standard element that you inherit throughout the title, but there's pluses and minuses. You can make a standard element and then use a variable or an action on the page to inherit that page's notes.
Hmm.
Boy, this might be boring to someone who doesn't care. Uh, you can use a variable to do that. The only trouble is when you use variables in text, you can't do formatting like bold and italics. So then it becomes tricky again. So there's pluses
Right.
and minuses with each approach.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, we found that with the dynamic text, or there's some issues there too in formatting, which can kind of get in the way of some of the things you want to do. But I think that'll be fixed in the future.
I think it will be solved.
Yep, there's
Yeah, I
small
agree.
things. There's small things like your bulleting kind of goes away, or it shows up when you don't want it. Just as little things when you import back in. We just noticed that there are some strange occurrences going on there. But on the whole, it just works really well.
What I like about working with Trivantis is that when you talk to them, you really get a strong sense that they hear you, they listen
Hmm.
to you, and they
Yeah.
care. So if you come across small things like this, the great thing is you can talk to them about it and they hear you and they're like, yeah, that's something we care about, we're working on. So
Yep.
I really
Yep.
get a strong sense from the company that when you have feedback on things, they totally take it to heart. And that's what I
I,
love about working with a product.
they're kind of like the old Ford commercial. Quality is job one, and I think I believe that because they do put good quality into the program, and the new releases when they come out, they're good. They don't break everything before it. They actually add to it, which is nice. Now, for those who might be wondering, what does the Fresh Market do?
Well, the Fresh Market is a regional grocery store. It was started in North Carolina in 1982. Currently, there are about 170 some stores. They go as far north as like Maine, and they go as far west as Texas, and some into the Midwest, not quite into Minnesota yet, but we're mostly focused in the Southeast. So in Florida, there's a lot of stores, and all through the Carolinas and up north through Maryland and New York and other places. So so that's the Fresh Market. It's a specialty grocery store, and yeah, basically it's a grocery store that it's not an enormous store. It's not trying to be the biggest store, or it's not trying to be in the most locations. It really focuses on freshness,
Okay.
fresh produce and fresh meat, and they also really focus on just incredible food, great eating experiences. Our company purpose is basically to help people experience extraordinary eating every day. So
Getting hungry. That sounds good.
it is.
Yeah. Is it like a Whole Foods kind of thing?
Sort of.
Sort of.
Whole Foods, I would say, is a little bit much more of a large store.
Okay.
It's a little bit more of a pricey store.
Hmm.
And Whole Foods, I think, focuses a little bit more strictly on organic. We have organic, but we also have other stuff too. So it's not as much of a focus on that. And it's not also whole paycheck.
Okay. Okay. Now you mentioned earlier Course Mill. You work with Course Mill as well?
I do. Course Mill is the LMS that we use. It's also made by Trivantis. And we don't call it Course Mill here. We actually call it FMU, which
Hmm.
stands for the Fresh Market University. Coming from UNC Greensboro, the kind of college motif was something that was very comfortable to me as far as kind of a platform for having online learning. So I decided to come up with kind of a college version of our online LMS. So we call it FMU, and we designed logos. I made little banners. At some point, we're probably going to make like little sweatshirts, and that's why I like to be called the Chancellor of FMU.
Well
It's really
deserved.
more of an honorary title, but I like it.
That's good. It is a good title. So, what kind of things? Well, actually, before we go on, you're also a member of the Lectora Advisory Board, which
Yeah.
is a small group, maybe 30, 40 people at most, who help with the product and product futures and everything else. I also recently got invited in it, and it's invited into the group, and it's really fun. Um, how did you wind up getting into the group?
I was asked. I was
Great.
asked by some of the Trivantis folks. I think Laura Silver asked, and it was after I went to the first Lectora user conference. At that point, I'd been using Lectora for I think about 6 months, and I was showing her a class that I had worked on, which I think she liked that class. She said, "You've only been using this 6 months," and I said, "Yeah," and she said, "Wow." And then a little bit later, I got a call to be on the advisory board.
That's
I
great.
have to admit, I've always felt a little intimidated because some of the people on the board are people that have been, in the community for a lot longer than me. But I think that's one of the good things about the board is that there's a diversity of opinions and
Hmm.
diversity of experience. I bring the uninformed point of view, and other people bring the informed point of view.
Oh, I don't think you're uninformed at all. um,
I tease,
and-
but I bring
yeah.
a different perspective perhaps than some others do.
Yeah, you're young, you've got energy. That's all good.
That's right.
That's a good thing.
But one thing I wanted to mention about CourseMill, at the last Lectora user conference, I actually did a presentation about CourseMill, about the ways that we've customized CourseMill,
Ah,
which at first when I was invited to the Lectora advisory board, I thought it was because of CourseMill, but of course, Lectora and CourseMill are a little bit different. So, but I always wondered, why are they inviting me here? But the customizations that we did in CourseMill are kind of interesting because we were able to build on the platform that Travanus has for the LMS and customize one of the features of the LMS, which was the news page. My presentation at the Lectora user conference was about how we did it. Would you be interested in knowing about it?
sure.
So the presentation was called Beyond Bling, which basically refers to the idea that when you customize the LMS, you can do things like you can change the colors to your company colors. You can also add a logo. But I wanted to do more than just the surface. I wanted to do more than just the bling. So we went beyond the bling to functional changes. Some of the interface was slightly stylized just to give it a different kind of navigational flow. But most importantly, we added a user homepage in the form of the news tab. The news tab is kind of like a place where you can, it's just a basic HTML page where you can plop down like a blog post or little articles or things that people can look at, like news, like what's happening with the LMS. But I really wanted to make it not just a one-way conversation. I wanted to make it a place where students could interact or they could find information that they needed. I definitely wanted to add a blog feature to it so that people could find out what's new and what's happening at FMU. But I also wanted to add a FAQ to it, a place where, because when people call in with questions about FMU, it comes to me and you start answering the same phone call 3 times and you think, oh no, I'm going to get a lot of phone calls about this, aren't I? So the FAQ is a great place to put information that a lot of people need. So I added a little corner where I basically had some questions that might be common things that people were wondering about FMU, like how do I run a report to find out who's completed what courses? And what courses should I be running a report on? Over time, and we call this page the student union. It's the landing page. We customize it so when a user first goes into the LMS, instead of landing on the My Courses page where you're basically faced with, here's some courses, do them. I want to have a conversation like, here's some new stuff you might consider. How about this course? And here's the schedule of upcoming courses. Here's a course that's coming up soon about food safety. So I wanted to have a little bit more of a dialogue. We've ended up, when we got our new CEO at the company not too long ago, we actually had a video welcome from the CEO and we put it on that page. We don't do a lot of TV advertising, but we recently did some exploration in TV advertising and we put the commercial up on that page. So it's become not just a place for information about courses strictly, but every now and then we'll have something else that kind of pertains to the entire community. I think it's nice to make the LMS a place where people, if you can drive some traffic there, it can help a lot more people be comfortable with going to the LMS. The situation of our company is such that not everyone that works in stores is sitting around in an office on a computer all day. They're out on the floor, they're stocking produce, or they're working in the grocery department. So they don't get on the computer every day. And sometimes if they haven't had a course in a while, they can forget how to do it. It can be a little bit tricky. So I like to have a watering hole where people come to relatively frequently to come and check out, see what's new, and see what new learning is available.
That's actually a great idea because most people go, have to go to an LMS. Oh, that's torture. They just, and what does LMS usually connote? Oh no, another compliance course. And
yeah,
so,
compliance I always, when I talk to folks about FMU, I definitely want them to feel like this is not a place where you must sign in and you must do this course and you must, sign your name in blood at the bottom. What I want people to feel like the LMS is a hardware store where all the tools are free. If you need a hammer, go get a hammer. Don't just leave it there. They're there for you. So I try to build the courses to be very engaging. Some courses have a compliance element to them, and that's always going to be true.
Sure.
But there's no reason why you can't engage your students at the same time. And really, learning happens when you engage them. So compliance is not my first focus. My first focus is learning. So
Right.
I
Right.
try to
No,
create the whole environment of the LMS. That's why we have a conversation. That's why it's not just do these courses, but hey, look at this cool course coming up. Don't you want to do it? Hey, look at that hammer. Go grab it and fix that fridge or something.
Yeah, so many companies are using the LMSs as basically a checkoff. Took it. Okay, we're indemnified. Let's move on. And that's not training. It's not learning. It's just checking things off. And it's sort of painful, too, at the same time. What do you think some of the trends are in e-learning that you've seen?
Well, some of the trends that I've noticed, so there's trends in the greater world, and then there's what is accomplishable in the world that I'm working in right now. So some of the things in the wider universe are not what I can work on right now, although I'm working on making them happen. But the trends are, number one, going mobile. And basically, the trend is towards convenience. And what's convenient? Well, something that's mobile is convenient because it's right there in your hands. It's either on a phone or better yet, I prefer the experience on a tablet. And we're starting to get tablets out to our stores, although we haven't used them yet for our training. But that's part of what is going to happen in the future. I'd love to see, for example, an employee orientation to the store where you can actually walk out onto the floor and it says, hey, let's walk over to the bakery. And why don't you pick up that French bread? Let me tell you about the French bread. Now let's walk over to the produce section. I'd also like to see training where if you're teaching someone how to build a display, if that's on a tablet, they can walk right out to the floor, watch the display, and do it right there on the floor. I don't want training to be, online training to be limited to like a little, computer in the back room somewhere, which is not the optimal training environment. It's better if you can involve the environment of the store. What you're training about can be part of what your training is. So one of the things I see is mobile. Another thing that I see is micro-learning. Micro-learning is where you learn what you need to know when you need to know it, and you only learn that. One of the things that you were talking about, the Lectora Advisory Board, I shared a story on the Lectora Advisory Board, which I will share here, that I have chickens. We have chickens at home. And our chickens got sick with a certain infection on their feet. The infection is called bumblefoot, which sounds absolutely adorable. But unfortunately, it's a staph infection, which can be fatal to a chicken. Yeah. Well, I have no background in chickens or bumblefeet or anything like that. So what did I do to figure out what to do? I went to YouTube and I typed in, in fact, my wife did a lot of research. She found a video on how to cure it. There's 3 ways to cure bumblefoot. Number 1, you just eat the chicken. Number 2, you take it to a veterinarian and the veterinarian looks at you like you're trying to do this for, how many chickens? This is going to be very expensive. Or number 3, you do surgery. And by surgery, I mean like you get a scalpel and you actually have to cut out the infection and then, sterilize it and stuff like that. So I went to YouTube and I watched the video. I watched it 3 times. That was my residency in becoming a bumblefoot surgeon, chicken surgeon. And then we performed surgery on the chickens in our surgical suite /laundry room. And I felt like I was like a Civil War doctor at times. I was like, hand me the next one and some whiskey. But anyway, we actually did the surgery on all the chickens based on the YouTube videos, and they all survived and they all recovered. So
now,
pretty remarkable.
Did you have to numb them?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did you have to numb them or no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a whole process where you have to clean it because chickens walk around in kind of dirty environment. So you had to clean the foot first, sterilize it, antibiotic ointment. You give them some rescue remedy. There's not a lot of anesthetics that were available for chickens at CVS. But you do give them a little bit of that. But they were awake during the procedure. And then you kind of cut it out.
That's pretty good. And they don't try to get out from while you're doing it.
Oh, they do.
They do.
Quite so.
Okay.
You have to wrap them tightly in a towel.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. That's actually pretty interesting.
But it goes to the point that when people need to know something, they don't want to have to sign up for, like, I didn't sign up for veterinary school or take a class or even a long thing. I wanted to know this one thing at this one point. Micro learning is, I guess, the industry term for it.
Yep.
So you want mobility, you want what you need to know at the time you need to know it. So someone else in the Lectora advisory board was talking about how that represented microlearning. I was just sharing it as kind of a crazy story of my life, but I think that that's very true. In fact, at the last Lectora user conference, Donald Taylor, the keynote opening guy, he was talking about how you can tell a lot about different countries because whatever the most searched Google term is, like how to tie a tie, was like number one for the United States because a lot of millennials were entering the job market and they wanted to know, how do you tie a tie? Like they hadn't had to do it before.
Interesting.
Now, what they don't want is they don't want a course on how to dress for work. Chapter 1, shopping. Chapter 10, how to tie a tie.
Right. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So microlearning is letting you get to what you need without having to go through the whole big course. And so that's really started to make me think and reconsider, well, how do I build my classes? How easy is it for people to get to what they want to know? You know, the model of I'm going to give you this training and you're going to learn it in the order that I tell you to learn it in. I don't know that that's going to be sustainable going forward. I think the smart money is on figuring out how to make your content available in a smart way. And sometimes people don't know what they need to know, but you want to make sure that it's quick and it's to the point and it's easy to get to and painless and hopefully entertaining.
And it sounds like, especially in what you're doing now, it's operational. It's something that makes them immediately functional. I love your idea of having an immersive training employee orientation and having the thing walk them around the whole store. That's brilliant. I love that.
That comes out of attending the Lectora user conference. The last one, Sergey had designed the QR code bingo.
Okay.
And, you know, sometimes it's like a scavenger hunt. Like in past conferences I've been to, you might have to go to all the vendors and they'll stamp your card and stuff like that. I've done that before because, you know, I want to get a free iPad. But I really got into the bingo. I was totally into like finding the QR code. Like I was going for it. So, and I was actually a little bit sad once I completed it. I was like, oh, I want to do it again.
Yeah.
Like I got bingo already, but I want to keep on doing it. So I'd love to take that kind of idea and put it in, have QR codes in the stores. Here's one other idea that came out of the Lectora user conference that I've been working on. One of the things that we want to teach our store employees is how do they know more about the products that we sell? Because a salesperson that understands the products is really going to do a fantastic job at selling it, right? Now, we also want customer service isn't just knowing things, but knowing things can be a big part of customer service. Well, what if we had a way that people could use their phones just to, scan the product and pull up information about it? Oh, this is gluten-free, and oh, this is, information about the product. Why not make it easy and possible to pull up sales information about products just by walking around the store? It's mobile. It's information that you need at the time you need it, so it's micro-learning, and it's really practical. Training can't be a function of just trying to get people to memorize tons of stuff. We outsource our brains nowadays to the internet and things like that because we can, but that allows us to use our minds for more strategic things. So I just think, how can we leverage things like that for issues that we want to attack, like increasing the amount of product knowledge and great customer service in our stores? So those are the kinds of things that you marinate on after you go through one of the user conferences. And you're like, wow, how does this apply to my world?
Yep. And immersive training, for example, is so effective, and most people think they can't do it. I did a talk on that at one of the ASTD Technologies, and we showed a sample of an immersive training course. And as a result, we actually got a contract from a pretty large company to create something similar. Then, of course, they ruined the whole idea by forcing people to go through every room. And I go, well, no, this is supposed to be a self-learning adventure and experience. No, they will go through every room. So,
yes.
No, but and since it was basically a volunteer, it wasn't a requirement, nobody went. A couple people went they wanted to have 30,000 people take it. I think they had 100. And you just go.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've really learned about creating immersive e-learning experience is you can't force it.
No.
You know, one of the,
No.
a quote that I want to take out of one of the other Lectora Advisory Board members, Peter Sorensen. I attended his session, the first Lectora user conference, and he said something that still, I think about it all the time. He said, sometimes we design e-learning to be a maze. There's one way in and there's one way out, and I'm going to make you hit every point along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Is that learning?
No.
And I realized, no, that's not learning. And you know, if you want to think about when learning happens, how it happens when people are engaged to explore, where you're giving them choices that you can make a difference. You can choose different paths. I always try in my courses, sometimes you just got to give the information to them, but I always think, can I give the user a choice here? Can I give them an option to choose what order they get the information in? Now that is a little bit harder to code, but it's so much more engaging when you feel like, oh yeah, which one do you want to do first? Do you want to learn about this, blue disposable gloves or the clear disposable gloves first? Even small choices like that, I think people appreciate because they're like, yeah, I'm going to do this one first, and I'm going to do that one first. Or giving them choices which make a real impact, like in an actual game, really engage the learner on a whole different level. So yeah. I'm always trying to ask myself, do I have to make the next button wait until the audio's done? Or can I, do I trust the user? I mean, some users here, they're going to click through, but on the other hand, there's the user that wants to go back and look at the previous page. And if they look at the previous page, am I making sure that the next button's there right away? I mean, there's all kinds of ways that trust plays a factor sure. in the way that you design your online courses. I'll give you just another example. We were doing we were using actual redheaded stepchild of Lectora. We were using Snap, also made by Travanus. I taught some of the folks in our company how to use it. So like the head of the bakery departments in the entire company, or the head of all of the produce departments, they were making little presentations that they were putting on the LMS every month that would talk about the programs for that particular month. We also put a 5-question quiz at the end of those little mini courses in order to ensure that the person got certain information. But the way it ended up coming across after we talked to folks in the field is it felt like, well, you're asking me to watch this thing, which is sort of voluntary. And then you're also checking up on me like you don't trust that I've actually done it. And that was not our intent at all. It wasn't the intent. And so I think one of the things that you have to be very aware of when you're designing online courses is, does it feel like a course that trusts the user? Sure. Or if I'm restricting things, am I doing it for a good reason? And is it really a good reason? Is learning going to happen if I hold the next button back? Is it really going to happen, or is that just going to be something? I mean, because the guy who just wants to click through is not going to learn, and is determined not necessarily to learn.
One of my favorite things that we torture people with is some clients want a page counter at the bottom, and I go, no, don't do that. No, we want a page counter. No, you really are going to demoralize people. We want a page counter. So you put in the page counter, page 1 of 222, and they're going. And as a student, it's like, does anybody have a razor blade? I mean, it's just horrible.
You're in for a long night.
It's a long night. And of course, we try to tell them, if you break lessons up into 3 to maybe 6, 7-minute snippets, they'll learn more. No, they must go through all 3 hours at once. Oh, but we want bookmarking. Of course you do. It's torturous. It's really torturing the students. And I've written about this for years. The LMS is your main menu. And they look at us like, why would it be my main menu? Because you launched the individual lessons from it. That is your menu. No, we don't want that. We want a menu in the course. But then it's a very long course. Yes. So it's
which goes away from micro learning.
Exactly.
What you're talking about is micro learning.
It's
you
macro
give the user
learning
control to get to where they want to get to.
Yeah, and it's macro learning without any verifiable results at the end.
Unfortunately, I think it's just the default instinct when you approach it from the supply side. Mm-hmm. The supply side thinking is, I have this information and you need to get it.
Right.
If you look at it from the student side, you want pull. You don't want to push the information on the students. You want them to pull it because they're going to retain it if they're pulling it. If you're pushing it on them, it just feels like, why is there this more stuff you're pushing on me? Very demoralizing.
And then, of
Yeah, I
course,
agree with you about the page count.
and then, of course, what happens is it gets out of context when it's being pushed at them, because
Yeah.
they may not understand the context of what they're learning versus when they're pulling, they know exactly why they need it.
And they're choosing it.
Yeah.
They're involved and they're taking ownership for learning it.
Yeah, you never would have gone on YouTube to find out about Bundlefoot or whatever that was called if you didn't
Bundlefoot.
have a need. So in context, you had to help those chickens.
Yeah.
Without that, would you have gone to learn that? Maybe, maybe not. You'd have to know about it. It's an interesting thing. I keep thinking, why does it take so long to graduate a doctor in our system? Nobody else takes that long in the whole world except us. I think it takes somewhere between 10 and 12 years to finally get your doctorate and be able to work with people. Whereas in most countries, within 4 to 6, you're a doctor. Not here. But most of it's just long, elaborate, dragged out. And I don't think our doctors are any better than other ones. We replace diagnostic capabilities with technology. That's a difference. It's,
I think
we don't
that a
teach
lot
doctors.
of things like that end up as a result of legacy thinking.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, so I might rock some people's worlds here. It's kind of like why people do 2 spaces after a period instead of 1. This is like one of the things, but it leads to, this is one of those issues that is like very controversial. And in a sense, it's funny because it's almost an arbitrary thing. But how many spaces do you put after a period? Most people were taught 2. And 2, there's a specific reason for it. It had to do with typewriters. It was a function of the technology at the time. Before typewriters, and also at the same time parallel to typewriters, printing presses always only used 1 space. One
Right.
space was the norm. But the function of the way that the typewriter fonts looked, typewriters produced very gappy text. The gaps between the words and in and among words can sometimes be very big. And so in order to have a clear visual break, they said you have to have 2 spaces. It's kind of a workaround for typewriters. But the workaround for typewriters ends up becoming this standard that people insist on, even when we no longer need them. Computers don't need 2 spaces after a period because they have proportionally spaced fonts. It's just a function of the technology. The technology changed, and yet we're still doing things this old-fashioned way because of a circumstance that no longer applies.
That's
It
interesting.
reminds me
I've
of
never run into that.
of a funny joke.
Yeah.
So my wife, when she was making the Easter ham, she would always cut the ends off the ham before she put it in the oven. And I said, well, honey, why do you cut the ends off the Easter ham? And she said, well, that's what Mom does. And I said, well, that's not what my mom does. And she said, well, and I said, well, all right, but let's ask your mom why she does that. So we asked her mom why she does that. And she said, well, Granny always did it. And she said, well, why does she do it? She said, I don't know. That's what she does. Well, one day we were visiting Granny and we said, Granny, I was always wondering, why do you cut the ends off of the Easter ham? And she said, oh, honey, my oven is so small, you can't fit a whole ham in there. So you have to cut both sides off the ham, and then you can fit the ham in the oven. That's why I cook it that way. So a situation that applies in one place gets passed down without knowledge of why we're doing it. And there's so many things like that that end up making things more complicated than they need to be. Does that make sense?
It does. And what did the period say to the sentence?
I give up.
It's over.
Nice.
Anyway, moving right along here. Well, this has been fun, and I'm looking forward. Are you going to be going to the Lectora Users Conference this year?
Absolutely. I'm really excited about it, and I'm definitely going to submit some proposals. Hope they pick me because there's all kinds of things I'd love to share. I really get as much out of kind of working with people that are excited about Lectora. Being a one-man band, I don't get to talk to people who are excited about variables very often. So it's a lot of fun for me to hang out with folks that are. Whether I'm helping them or they're helping me, it's just a lot of fun. And as you can tell from all my references in the conversation, I get a lot out of the conference. So it usually gives me a lot to think about and a lot to mull over. in the interim. So I'm super excited about it.
And they are fun. I'm looking forward. This is going to be my first one. I've missed several because of conflicts, scheduling conflicts. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Well, we'll definitely have to catch up.
We'll
will have to. Yeah,
it'll be fun.
That'll be fun.
Well, John, I'm glad you could make it on. I'm sorry I held you up this morning. We had some issues. Clark, who is our operator, isn't here today, so I said, no problem, I can handle it, which I can, except they changed the interface, and I wound up going, where is John's lower third? Took me a while to figure that out. But we got it resolved, and John is now John, because he was another John for a while. Got it all fixed up.
I could have been John
really
Laws. I could have tried to
on.
do an impersonation or something. That would have been fun.
Well, at least, okay. John, you had John Laws lower third, and he's a great guy. So, it's not a bad person to be, I guess.
I know John Laws well. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I interviewed him last week. Loved it. He was great. So
that's terrific.
Well, appreciate you coming on. Look forward to seeing you soon. And if you are watching the show on YouTube, please subscribe. Give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. We will see you next time on Lectora Live. Bye-bye. Thanks, John. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.